The final 6 months of Sarah and Marcus's contract passed in a strange mixture of growing closeness and careful distance. They had learned to read each other's moods and preferences with an intimacy that neither had expected. Marcus started bringing Sarah coffee in the morning before she left for her volunteer work, and Sarah began preparing dinner for both of them instead of eating alone in her room. Their public appearances became more natural and convincing as their private relationship deepened. Other couples at business events often commented on how devoted they seemed to each other, and their body language reflected a genuine comfort that couldn't be faked. Marcus found himself looking forward to the events where Sarah would be by his side, and Sarah discovered that she genuinely enjoyed watching Marcus work his legal magic with difficult clients. The first crack in their carefully maintained professional relationship came when Sarah fell ill with a severe flu. Marcus surprised them both by canceling important meetings to take care of her, bringing her soup and medicine and checking on her throughout the day. When Sarah asked why he was going to such trouble for someone who was essentially an employee, Marcus couldn't give her a satisfactory answer. Sarah's father made a complete recovery, returning to work and regaining his strength thanks to the treatment that Marcus had funded. During a family dinner at the penthouse, Sarah watched Marcus interact with her parents with genuine warmth and interest. Her father and Marcus discovered a shared love of classic movies, while her mother was charmed by Marcus's unexpected sense of humor when he relaxed his professional guard. After her parents left that evening, Sarah confronted Marcus about his behavior. She pointed out that their contract didn't require him to be kind to her family or to care for her when she was sick. Marcus became defensive, insisting that he was simply maintaining appearances and protecting his investment in their arrangement. But Sarah could see through his excuses, and they both knew something fundamental had changed between them. The turning point came during a business crisis that threatened to destroy everything Marcus had worked to build. A former client accused him of malpractice, and the media attention threatened to ruin his reputation and cost him several major contracts. The stress was enormous, and Marcus worked around the clock trying to clear his name and save his firm. Sarah watched Marcus struggle with the false accusations and realized that she cared about his success for reasons that had nothing to do with their contract. She used her teaching skills to help him organize his defense, spending nights researching legal precedents and helping him prepare for depositions. Her support during this crisis went far beyond what their agreement required, and Marcus knew it. When Marcus finally cleared his name and won the case, Sarah was genuinely happy for his success. They celebrated quietly at home with champagne and takeout food, talking late into the night about their fears and hopes. For the first time since their marriage began, they forgot about contracts and arrangements and simply enjoyed each other's company. As their 2-year deadline approached, both Sarah and Marcus became increasingly uncomfortable discussing the future. They had fallen into patterns of domestic life that felt natural and right, but neither wanted to be the first to admit that their feelings had grown beyond their original business arrangement. The financial settlement that had once seemed like Sarah's salvation now felt like payment for leaving someone she had grown to love. 3 weeks before their contract was set to expire, Marcus received an offer from a prestigious law firm in London. The opportunity would establish him as one of the top international lawyers in his field, but it would also mean leaving everything behind to start fresh in another country. He struggled with the decision, knowing that accepting the offer would solve the problem of what to do about Sarah, while avoiding the messy emotional complications they had created. Sarah learned about the London offer when she overheard Marcus discussing it with his assistant. The realization that he was planning to leave without discussing it with her felt like a betrayal, even though she knew their contract gave him no obligation to consider her feelings in his career decisions. She spent that day walking around the city, trying to prepare herself for a future that suddenly felt empty and uncertain. That evening, Marcus found Sarah packing her belongings, preparing to move out before their official separation date. When he asked why she was leaving early, Sarah told him that she couldn't pretend everything was normal when she knew he was planning to disappear from her life completely. The conversation that followed was the most honest they had ever had with each other. Marcus admitted that he was scared of what their relationship had become and that the London offer felt like an escape from feelings he didn't know how to handle. Sarah confessed that she had fallen in love with him despite their agreement, and that watching him leave would be more painful than she could bear. They stood in the penthouse living room, surrounded by the luxury that had brought them together, finally acknowledging the emotional connection they had been trying to ignore. The resolution of their story wasn't the fairy tale ending that Sarah had once dreamed about, but it was honest and real. Marcus turned down the London position, choosing to stay and build a life with Sarah that wasn't defined by contracts or financial arrangements. They remarried in a small ceremony with Sarah's family and a few close friends, exchanging vows that came from their hearts rather than from legal documents. Sarah returned to teaching, using her experience with Marcus's business world to develop programs that helped her students understand financial literacy and professional communication. Marcus discovered that having a genuine partner made him a better lawyer and a happier person. Their relationship, born from desperation and necessity, had grown into something neither of them had expected to find: a marriage based on mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine love. The penthouse that had once felt like a beautiful prison became a real home, filled with laughter, friends, and the kind of ordinary happiness that no amount of money could buy. Sarah's father often joked that his illness had brought them the best son-in-law they could have asked for, while Sarah and Marcus knew that their unconventional beginning had led them to exactly where they belonged. Sarah's answer to Marcus's question surprised them both. Instead of the polite, superficial response he expected, she told him the truth about how isolated and empty she felt, despite all the luxury surrounding her. She explained that while she was grateful for everything he had done for her family, she was struggling with the emotional cost of living like a stranger in someone else's life. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished speaking, he was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the city below. Finally, he admitted that he hadn't considered the emotional impact of their arrangement on her. He had been so focused on the business benefits that he had treated her like a piece of furniture, rather than a person with feelings and needs. This conversation marked a subtle shift in their relationship. Marcus began asking Sarah about her day and showing genuine interest in her responses. He learned that she missed teaching and suggested she might want to volunteer at a local literacy center. When she mentioned feeling disconnected from her friends, he encouraged her to maintain those relationships, even if she couldn't explain the full truth about her situation. Sarah started volunteering at the community center 2 days a week, working with adults who were learning to read. The work gave her a sense of purpose that had been missing from her life of charity galas and business dinners. She discovered that she could find fulfillment even within the constraints of her unusual marriage. Marcus began including Sarah in some of his business decisions, asking for her opinion on client presentations and strategy meetings. He was surprised to find that her teaching background had given her excellent communication skills and insights into human behavior that were valuable in his work. Sarah felt useful for the first time since their marriage began. Their first real crisis as a couple came when Marcus's biggest client, Mr. Yamamoto, invited them to spend a weekend at his family's estate in Japan. This wasn't just a business dinner or charity event. It was an intimate gathering where they would be expected to act like a genuinely married couple for an entire weekend. The success of this visit could make or break a multi-million-dollar international contract. Mr. Yamamoto was from a traditional Japanese family where personal relationships were considered just as important as business credentials. He wanted to get to know Marcus and his wife on a personal level before committing to such a significant legal partnership. The pressure to appear genuinely happy and in love was unlike anything Sarah and Marcus had faced before. They spent hours preparing for the trip, creating a detailed backstory about their relationship and practicing natural-seeming interactions. Marcus told Sarah about his childhood, his relationship with his parents, and his dreams for the future. Information she needed to sound like a loving wife who knew her husband intimately. In return, Sarah shared stories about her family, her teaching career, and her hopes for the future. During these preparation sessions, something unexpected began to happen. The boundaries between their real selves and their performed roles started to blur. Marcus found himself genuinely interested in Sarah's stories about her students and her passion for education. Sarah discovered that beneath Marcus's cold, professional exterior was someone who had been hurt by past relationships and had built walls to protect himself. The weekend in Japan was beautiful and terrifying. Mr. Yamamoto's estate was traditional and elegant, surrounded by carefully maintained gardens that took Sarah's breath away. The family welcomed them warmly, but Sarah could feel them watching every interaction between her and Marcus, looking for signs of genuine affection and compatibility. During a traditional tea ceremony, Mrs. Yamamoto asked Sarah about her plans for starting a family with Marcus. The question caught Sarah completely off guard, and she struggled to give an appropriate response that wouldn't compromise their business arrangement. Marcus smoothly intervened, explaining that they were focusing on his career expansion before starting a family, but his protective response felt surprisingly genuine. That evening, alone in their guest room, Marcus and Sarah had to share a bed for the first time since their marriage. The intimacy of the situation was awkward and charged with tension they hadn't expected. They lay awake talking quietly about the day's events, and Sarah found herself seeing Marcus as a man rather than just a business partner for the first time. The breakthrough moment came when Mr. Yamamoto's elderly father asked Marcus to explain why he had chosen Sarah as his wife. Instead of giving the rehearsed answer they had practiced, Marcus spoke from the heart about Sarah's strength, intelligence, and dedication to her family. His words were so sincere that even Sarah was moved by them, wondering if he truly saw those qualities in her, or if he was just an exceptional actor. The weekend was a complete success from a business perspective. The Yamamoto family was charmed by the couple, and Mr. Yamamoto agreed to the partnership that would expand Marcus's firm internationally. But the personal cost was higher than either Sarah or Marcus had anticipated. They had crossed a line during those 3 days, moving from strangers playing roles to two people who were beginning to care about each other. On the flight home, they sat in comfortable silence, both processing what had happened between them. The careful boundaries they had maintained for months had shifted, and neither of them was sure what that meant for the remaining year of their contract. Sarah found herself wondering if Marcus's feelings during the weekend had been real or just excellent acting, while Marcus questioned whether the connection he felt with Sarah was genuine or just the result of spending so much time together. Back in the penthouse, they returned to their separate bedrooms, but the dynamic between them had changed permanently. The polite distance that had characterized their relationship was replaced by something more complex and uncertain. They had discovered that the line between pretending to be married and actually caring for each other was thinner than either of them had realized. Sarah lay in her bed that night, staring at the ceiling and wondering if she was falling for a man who saw her as nothing more than an exceptionally talented employee. The success of their weekend performance had created new problems that neither of them had anticipated when they signed their careful, emotionless contract. Marcus's penthouse apartment was everything Sarah had expected, and nothing she was prepared for. The elevator opened directly into the living space, revealing floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the city skyline. The furniture was modern and expensive, arranged with the same precision that Marcus applied to everything else in his life. Sarah's bedroom was larger than her entire previous apartment, complete with a walk-in closet that Catherine had already filled with the clothes they had purchased that morning. The bathroom featured a marble bathtub and shower that looked like something from a luxury hotel. Despite the opulence, the space felt cold and impersonal, like a beautiful museum where people weren't meant to actually live. Marcus gave her a brief tour of the apartment, pointing out the kitchen she was welcome to use, the home office where he worked in the evenings, and the dining room where they would occasionally need to entertain clients. He explained the household rules in the same business-like tone he had used during their contract negotiations. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, came 3 times a week to clean and could prepare meals if needed. Sarah was expected to maintain the apartment's pristine appearance and notify Marcus in advance if she planned to have any visitors. He made it clear that this was his private sanctuary, and he valued order and quiet above all else. Their first business event together was a charity gala the following Saturday. Sarah spent the week learning about Marcus's business and the important clients who would be attending. He provided her with detailed files about each person she would meet, including their family situations, business interests, and topics of conversation she should avoid. The transformation from teacher to trophy wife felt overwhelming. Sarah practiced walking in high heels, learned the proper way to greet clients and their spouses, and memorized talking points about art, travel, and current events that would make her seem sophisticated and well-educated. Marcus was a demanding teacher, correcting her posture and conversation style with the same intensity he brought to his legal work. On the night of the gala, Sarah barely recognized herself in the mirror. The navy blue evening gown Catherine had selected was elegant and expensive, and the professional makeup artist had transformed her appearance completely. Diamond earrings that Marcus had selected completed the look, making her appear every inch the successful lawyer's wife. Marcus looked handsome in his black tuxedo, and when he offered her his arm, they made a striking couple. The gala was held at the city's most exclusive hotel, and Sarah was amazed by the wealth and glamour surrounding her. The guests wore jewelry worth more than most people's houses, and the casual conversation revolved around vacation homes, private jets, and business deals worth millions of dollars. Sarah found herself playing the role of devoted wife with surprising skill. She smiled at the right moments, laughed at boring jokes, and made small talk about topics she had studied all week. Marcus stayed close to her side, occasionally placing his hand on her back or touching her arm in gestures that appeared affectionate but felt purely performative. The evening was a success by Marcus's standards. Several potential clients approached him for consultations, and the established client seemed impressed by his charming wife. Sarah overheard compliments about their perfect marriage and how lucky Marcus was to have found such a lovely woman. The irony wasn't lost on her. During the following weeks, Sarah settled into her strange new routine. She attended business lunches where wives were expected to appear, but not really participate in the conversation. She accompanied Marcus to client dinners where she smiled pleasantly, while million-dollar deals were discussed over expensive wine. She learned to read his subtle signals about when to speak and when to remain quiet. The hardest part was the isolation. Sarah couldn't tell anyone the truth about her marriage, which meant she couldn't really connect with the other wives she met at these events. Their conversations about genuine marriages and family planning felt like reminders of everything her arrangement with Marcus lacked. She missed her teaching job and the authentic relationships she had built with her students and colleagues. Marcus was exactly as advertised, professional, distant, and completely focused on business. He treated Sarah with polite respect, but showed no interest in getting to know her as a person. Their conversations were limited to logistics about upcoming events and feedback on her performance at previous functions. He worked long hours and often brought clients to the apartment for meetings, where Sarah was expected to play hostess with perfect grace. The loneliness was almost overwhelming. Sarah had traded her modest but genuine life for luxury and isolation. She had a beautiful home, unlimited shopping budget, and access to the finest restaurants and entertainment, but she had no one to share any of it with. Marcus was physically present but emotionally absent, treating her like a skilled employee rather than a wife. 3 months into their arrangement, Sarah received news that changed everything. Her father's treatment was working better than anyone had expected. The experimental therapy that Marcus had paid for was shrinking the tumor significantly, and the oncologist was optimistic about his chances for full recovery. Her mother called with tears of joy, unable to express how grateful she was for the miracle that had saved her husband's life. Sarah stood in the penthouse kitchen after that phone call, looking out at the city lights and feeling a complex mix of emotions. She was thrilled about her father's recovery, but she was also beginning to understand the true cost of the deal she had made. She had saved her father's life, but she was slowly losing herself in the process. That evening, Marcus returned from a business trip and found Sarah sitting quietly in the living room. For the first time since their marriage, he seemed to notice that something was different about her mood. He asked if everything was all right, and Sarah realized that this was the first personal question he had asked her in months. The moment felt significant, like a crack in the wall he had built around himself, but she wasn't sure if it meant anything at all. Sarah spent the afternoon walking around the city in a daze, unable to focus on anything except Marcus's shocking proposal. She found herself sitting on a park bench, watching families play together while her mind wrestled with the impossible decision she had to make. Every time she thought about saying no, she pictured her father's pale face and her mother's worried expression. She called her best friend Maria, desperate to talk to someone about what had happened. But when she tried to explain the situation, the words sounded crazy even to her own ears. Maria thought she was joking at first, then became concerned that Sarah might be having some kind of breakdown from the stress of her father's illness. By 4 o'clock, Sarah knew she had to make a choice. She walked to the hospital to see her father, hoping that seeing him would help clarify her thoughts. He was sleeping when she arrived, looking frail and thin under the white hospital sheets. The machines around his bed beeped quietly, monitoring his weak vital signs. Her mother was sitting in the uncomfortable chair beside the bed, holding her husband's hand. When she saw Sarah, she tried to smile, but the exhaustion was clear in her eyes. They stepped out into the hallway to talk, and Sarah's mother explained that the doctors wanted to try a new treatment, but the insurance company had denied it again. Without the treatment, they were running out of options. Sarah looked through the window at her father and made her decision. She couldn't let him die because they didn't have enough money. She told her mother that she had found a way to pay for the treatment, but she couldn't explain the details yet. Her mother was so relieved that she started crying, hugging Sarah tightly in the hospital corridor. At exactly 6 o'clock, Sarah called Marcus from the hospital parking lot. Her hands were shaking as she dialed his number, and her voice was barely a whisper when she said yes to his proposal. Marcus seemed unsurprised by her decision and immediately began outlining the next steps in his typical efficient manner. He told her that his driver would pick her up at 8 the next morning. They would go shopping for appropriate clothes first, then meet with his lawyer to sign the marriage contract, and finally go to the courthouse for the ceremony. Marcus explained that he had already arranged for her father to be transferred to the best private hospital in the city, where the top oncologist would begin treatment immediately. Sarah barely slept that night, lying in her small apartment and wondering what she had gotten herself into. She packed a bag with her few belongings, knowing that by evening, she would be living in a penthouse with a man she barely knew. The whole situation felt surreal, like something that happened to other people in movies, not to small-town teachers from modest families. The next morning, a sleek black car arrived precisely at 8 o'clock. The driver was polite but professional, treating Sarah with the same respect he would show any of Marcus's business associates. She felt out of place in the luxury vehicle, surrounded by leather seats and technology she didn't understand. Their first stop was an upscale boutique where Marcus was waiting with a personal stylist named Catherine. Catherine was a sophisticated woman in her 50s who seemed to understand immediately what kind of image Marcus wanted Sarah to project. She selected elegant but conservative outfits that would be appropriate for business functions and social events. Sarah felt like a doll being dressed up as she tried on expensive dresses, suits and shoes that cost more than she made in a month. Marcus watched the process with a critical eye, approving or rejecting each outfit based on criteria Sarah didn't understand. He wanted her to look successful and refined, but not flashy or attention-seeking. The wedding dress Catherine selected was simple but beautiful, a cream-colored silk dress that made Sarah look sophisticated and mature. As she stood in front of the mirror, Sarah barely recognized herself. The woman looking back at her appeared confident and elegant, nothing like the struggling teacher who had walked into Marcus's office the day before. Marcus's lawyer, Mr. Peterson, met them at the law office to go over the marriage contract. The document was thick and detailed, outlining every aspect of their arrangement. Sarah would receive a monthly allowance for personal expenses, access to Marcus's credit card for approved purchases, and a substantial sum at the end of their 2-year agreement. The contract also spelled out her responsibilities clearly. She would attend all business and social functions that Marcus required, maintain a professional appearance at all times, and never discuss the true nature of their arrangement with anyone outside of the legal team. She would have her own bedroom and bathroom in his apartment, but she was expected to present a united front whenever they were in public. Mr. Peterson explained that breaking the contract early would result in Sarah forfeiting all financial benefits, including her father's medical care. The stakes were made crystal clear, and Sarah understood that she was entering into a binding business agreement that would control every aspect of her life for the next 2 years. At the courthouse, Judge Williams performed a simple ceremony with Mr. Peterson and Catherine as witnesses. Marcus had chosen Judge Williams because he was known for his discretion and had performed similar arrangements for other wealthy clients who needed quick, private marriages for business purposes. As Sarah repeated her vows, she felt like she was watching someone else's life unfold. The words felt strange in her mouth, and Marcus's kiss at the end of the ceremony was brief and emotionless, more like a handshake than the seal of a marriage. When Judge Williams pronounced them husband and wife, Sarah realized that she was now Mrs. Sarah Wellington, married to a man whose last name she would carry, but whose heart she would never touch. Marcus Wellington's proposal hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. He wanted Sarah to marry him. Not for love, not for companionship, but as part of a business arrangement that would solve both of their problems. Sarah sat frozen in her chair, certain she had misunderstood what he was saying. Marcus explained his situation with the same calm, professional tone he might use to discuss a legal contract. His law firm was expanding internationally, and many of his potential clients came from traditional backgrounds where they preferred working with married men. Being single at 34 was starting to hurt his business reputation, especially in certain cultural circles where family stability was seen as a sign of trustworthiness and maturity. He had tried dating, but every relationship ended the same way. Women either wanted his money or couldn't handle his demanding schedule and perfectionist nature. Marcus was tired of the games and the disappointments. He needed someone who would understand that this was a practical arrangement, not a romantic fairy tale. Sarah listened in disbelief as Marcus outlined his terms. He would pay for all of her father's medical treatment, including experimental therapies that weren't covered by insurance. He would also provide her family with a monthly stipend to cover their living expenses, while her father recovered. In exchange, she would need to move into his penthouse apartment and play the role of his devoted wife at business functions and social events. The arrangement would last for exactly 2 years. During that time, Sarah would be expected to attend charity galas, business dinners, and client meetings as his wife. She would need to dress appropriately for these events, and Marcus would provide her with a clothing allowance and personal stylist. After 2 years, they would quietly divorce, and Sarah would receive a substantial settlement that would ensure her family's financial security for years to come. Marcus made it clear that this would be a marriage in name only. They would have separate bedrooms in his apartment, and he expected her to maintain professional boundaries at all times. He wasn't looking for romance or physical intimacy. He simply needed a wife who could play the part convincingly and help him secure important business deals. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to process everything he was telling her. The logical part of her brain recognized that this could be the answer to all of her family's problems. Her father could get the treatment he needed, and her mother wouldn't have to worry about losing their house. But the emotional side of her rebelled against the idea of entering into such a cold, calculated arrangement. She asked Marcus why he had chosen her specifically. He explained that he had been observing her for several minutes before approaching her in the lobby. He could tell she was desperate but also dignified. She hadn't begged or made a scene, which showed she had self-control. Her appearance was neat and modest, suggesting she would know how to conduct herself properly in professional settings. Marcus also admitted that he had done a quick background check while they were talking. His assistant had pulled up information about Sarah's teaching job, her clean credit history before the medical bills, and her family situation. He was impressed by her dedication to working 2 jobs to help her family and her lack of any criminal record or social media drama. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the speed at which everything was moving. She asked for time to think about his proposal, but Marcus told her that he needed an answer immediately. He had a business trip scheduled for the following week, and if she agreed, they would need to be married before he left. He had already contacted a judge who could perform a private ceremony within 24 hours. The pressure of making such a life-changing decision so quickly made Sarah's head spin. She thought about her father lying in the hospital bed, getting weaker every day. She pictured her mother working extra shifts at the diner, her hands raw from washing dishes to try to pay the medical bills. The weight of her family's suffering pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. Marcus seemed to understand her internal struggle. He told her that he knew this wasn't an easy decision, but sometimes life forced people to make difficult choices. He assured her that he would treat her with respect, and that the arrangement would be purely professional. He even offered to draw up a detailed contract outlining both of their responsibilities and expectations. As Sarah sat in that expensive office, surrounded by symbols of wealth and success she had never experienced, she realized that this might be her only chance to save her father's life. The conventional part of her mind screamed that marrying a stranger for money was wrong, but the desperate daughter in her saw it as a practical solution to an impossible problem. Marcus gave her his business card, and told her to call him by 6 o'clock that evening with her decision. If she agreed, his driver would pick her up the next morning to take her shopping for appropriate clothes and to meet with the judge. If she declined, he would forget they ever met and move on to other options. Sarah left the building feeling like she was walking through a dream. The busy city street seemed surreal as she made her way home, Marcus's proposal echoing in her mind with every step. She had entered his office as a desperate teacher and was leaving as a woman who might become the wife of a millionaire by the next evening. Sarah Martinez stared at the legal documents spread across her kitchen table, her hands trembling as she read the same paragraph for the third time. The medical bills from her father's cancer treatment had piled up like a mountain of debt she could never climb. 26 years old and working 2 jobs as a teacher and weekend waitress, she barely made enough to cover rent, let alone the $100,000 her family owed to the hospital. Her phone buzzed with another call from a debt collector. She let it go to voicemail, just like the 15 others from that week. The stress was eating her alive, and she could see the worry lines forming around her mother's eyes every time they talked about money. Her father needed another round of chemotherapy, but the insurance company had denied coverage, claiming it was experimental treatment. That evening, while grading papers at the local coffee shop, Sarah overheard a conversation at the next table. 2 women were discussing someone named Marcus Wellington, a millionaire lawyer who had a reputation for helping people in desperate situations. One woman mentioned how he had saved her sister's house from foreclosure, but there was something strange about the way he operated. He always asked for something unusual in return. Sarah's ears perked up as she listened more carefully. The women talked about how Marcus had specific requirements for the people he helped. He was known to be extremely particular about who he chose to assist, and his methods were unconventional. Some people called him eccentric. Others whispered that he was lonely despite his wealth and success. The next morning, Sarah found herself standing outside the gleaming glass building that housed Wellington and Associates. The lobby was intimidating with its marble floors and expensive artwork, making her feel out of place in her simple dress and worn shoes. She had spent hours researching Marcus Wellington online, learning about his successful law firm and his reputation for taking on impossible cases. Marcus Wellington was 34 years old, never married and known for his brilliant legal mind. He had built his fortune by winning cases that other lawyers wouldn't touch. Despite his success, there were rumors about his personal life. People said he was demanding and had very specific ideas about how things should be done. Some former employees described him as controlling, while others said he was simply a perfectionist who expected excellence from everyone around him. Sarah approached the receptionist with sweaty palms and a racing heart. She explained that she needed to speak with Mr. Wellington about a personal matter. The receptionist, a polished woman with perfectly styled hair, looked Sarah up and down with obvious judgment. She was told that Mr. Wellington didn't take walk-in appointments and that she would need to submit a formal request through the proper channels. Feeling defeated, Sarah was about to leave when the elevator doors opened and a tall man in an expensive suit stepped out. He had dark hair, sharp features, and the kind of confidence that filled a room. Their eyes met across the lobby and something made him pause. He walked over to where Sarah stood, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor. Marcus Wellington studied Sarah with intense blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. He asked if she was there to see him, and when she nodded, he surprised everyone by inviting her up to his office. The receptionist looked shocked, clearly not used to her boss breaking protocol for a stranger. His office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Expensive paintings hung on the walls and everything was perfectly organized. Sarah felt even more intimidated as she sat in the leather chair across from his massive desk. Marcus poured himself a glass of water and offered her one, his movements precise and calculated. When Sarah began explaining her situation, Marcus listened without interrupting. She told him about her father's cancer, the mounting medical bills, and her family's desperate financial situation. She mentioned that she had heard he sometimes helped people in unusual circumstances and that she was willing to do whatever it took to save her father's life. Marcus was quiet for a long time after she finished speaking. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her, his hands clasped behind him. The silence stretched on until Sarah wondered if she had made a mistake coming there. Finally, he turned around with an expression she couldn't read. He told her that he might be able to help with her father's medical expenses and even arrange for the best oncologist in the city to take over his care. Sarah's heart leaped with hope, but she could tell there was more coming. Marcus returned to his desk and sat down. His fingers steepled as he studied her face. Then came the words that would change everything. Marcus explained that his assistance always came with conditions, and in her case, there was something specific he needed in return. Sarah held her breath, prepared for him to ask for money she didn't have or work she couldn't do. Instead, what he proposed left her completely speechless and wondering if she had heard him correctly.